Hi everyone, welcome back. So I literally just finished maybe like 3 minutes ago reading Dust by Patricia Cromwell. Um, it's Cornwell. I just apparently can't talk right now because I'm actually really excited. So to give you some backstory, Patricia Cornwell has written a bajillion D books. That's not an exact number, but specifically has written 24 of the Scarpetta mystery series. Um, I don't really know if they classify as mystery. It might be more crime. I'm sure that if I read the inside cover, it would confirm, as I'm pretty sure they are listed as fiction, medical examiners, forensic pathologist, murder victims, Massachusetts, Cambridge, fiction, serial murders. And wow, I was wrong. There is no mention of crime in this, which is strange since, murder's a crime. But with that being said, I am actually really excited about this book, not just because my new hair matches the cover, which was totally unintentional, but also super exciting. I'm really jazzed about this book because I have been reading all of her Scarpetta novels, with the exception of number one. I started at number two because my library didn't have the first one and I couldn't wait. So I've been reading them for a while now. I started back in the summer, and technically I didn't start with number two either. I started with 10, but that was before I knew it was a series. This is the 10th book. It's called Black Notice. And I got this book when we were down the shore. I was with a group of my friends, and someone gave it to me, and I read it. And I was super intrigued. I was like, wow, there's this woman. She's a forensic pathologist. She's a medical examiner, a lawyer, or a doctor. She is really cool. And she solves crimes or helps murders get solved. And I was so excited when I realized that this was book 10 in a series and wanted to read all of them. So I went to my library. They didn't have number one, but they had number two, and I couldn't wait. So I just started reading them, and I plowed through them. I was reading like one of these books a day because they're really good. They're really interesting. They have a strong female lead. They're not, you can solve them, but also sometimes it's a surprise. So I had nothing but great things to say about these books until I don't remember which one it was specifically. I'm going to pull up the list. It was somewhere around 14 or 15, Predator or Book of the Dead, where I started to notice a change. Most of them were about this size. This is, again, book number 10, Black Notice. And they were great. Couldn't say enough great things about them. Then they started to get a little bigger. This is Dust that we just finished, we meaning me, and this is Black Notice. So they're not that much different from the spines, but when you look, there's a difference. And all of a sudden, her novels started getting longer. She herself looks a little different here than in the beginning of the series. And the one thing I noticed, and I'm not trying to be mean, but the one thing I noticed is that once her books got really big and her face started looking a little different than it had in the past, her books lost something, at least for me, as an avid reader and someone who was really into this series and turning over books in a day. They lost a little bit of oomph. They got longer. There was a bunch of information that never needed to be there. Her main character got a little pontificating, or started pontificating more. And so it was really a bummer. I was kind of forcing myself to finish reading the last couple that I read. One was Red Mist and The Bone Bed. The Bone Bed took me way too long to read because I just couldn't seem to get into it the same way I had with her previous novels, and was a little afraid I wasn't going to be able to keep going because I need to finish the series. I don't know if that happens to anyone else. Like I start something and I need to finish it, especially if it's a book. Like I have to finish it. So I'm really excited because Dust was one of her better books in a long time, or what feels like a long time for me. At least the past 5 books have not been so great, but this one picked it back up. She's a little long-winded. There was some unnecessary stuff. Her point of view changes. And what I mean by that is the first, I want to say 10, don't quote me. I probably should have done more research before I started this. But again, I was really excited and like had to come do this video immediately. Her first 10 books or so, 10 is still written in first person. So maybe it was a little past that. She switches from first person to third person narrative, which is fine. I can deal with it. Took me a couple minutes, but I got over it. Finally got really into it. And then boom, she switched back to first person again. So it was a little much for those of us that don't really like first person or change, but it ended up being a good thing. So now that I'm done rambling, I can tell you Dust, highly recommend. There's also a number of books related to number 10 called Black Notice, also highly recommend. Do not read number 10. If you plan on reading this series in order, don't start with 10. That is what I will tell you. Definitely ruin some things. But Dust was great. It started a little, I wasn't sure if it was gonna, pick up or if it was just gonna be like her past couple of books where they were just long-winded and not necessary. But Dust really pulled it together. There is clues in the beginning, there's suspense, there's obviously fictional murder. It's just still sad. Murder's bad. Don't do that. But it was really cool, and I can't say that enough. It had a really strong story. It was interesting to follow. It was fun to figure out. The last couple pages, probably like the last 15, she gets a little long-winded again, but hey, she wrote a much better book than the past couple. And I will say, if you're into forensic pathology or crime or reading books about murder or strong female characters, this series, the Scarpetta series, she hasn't really named it, at least not that I'm aware of. Some of them are called a Scarpetta novel. Some of them are called nothing related to that. They're just a title of a book, but they are really interesting, and I highly recommend them, at least the beginning of the series. Again, once her books get a little bigger and her face evolves, you know that you're getting into the long-winded ones, at least in my opinion. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Oh, she has a cookbook as well. Dr. Kay Scarpetta, who is the main character and the forensic pathologist, medical examiner, lawyer, doctor, she's literally all of these things. Believe it or not, it ends up being realistic, so take that for what it's worth. But she also has in her 24 books, there's the 9th, they call it 9B on the internet list I'm going to reference in the comments or the description section. There's a cookbook, which I have not found yet, but I want to, because the way this woman talks about food, at some points it's a little much, but also as someone who loves food, it does bring me a little bit of joy. Now, I'm Italian. I grew up in an Italian family. We had Sunday dinners. We make homemade pasta. It's really nice. We do the Feast of the Seven Fishes for Christmas Eve. I love food. I do. I love food. You can probably tell I love food, but the way she talks about it can be a little much, like borderline pretentious. I'm not going to lie to you, but if you like food, it'll also make you happy. So I think, and hungry. If you like Italian, it will also make you hungry, because it did make me, there were a couple of food things she was referencing throughout the various books that I've read by Patricia Cornwell. And I've wanted to call my grandmother and be like, hey, can you cook me dinner? So yes, don't read on an empty stomach or you will desperately want Italian food. So that's my one side note that's a little fun and a little different. You wouldn't expect recipes or a cookbook from a book that's centered around autopsies and murder. The other really cool thing, if you're interested in learning the earlier works by her in the Scarpetta series, because I will note as an aside to an aside, that she does have a number of other books. She has a nonfiction book. I haven't read any of these, but she has a nonfiction book about Jack the Ripper. She has the Andy Brazil series, which has 3 books. The Win Grano series, which has 2 books. She has a biography of Ruth Bell Graham and other works, including Food to Die For, that was punny, Secrets from Kay Scarpetta's Kitchen, as well as Scarpetta's Winter Tale. So apparently she has 2 cookbooks, which is exciting. Both of them are centered around Dr. Kay Scarpetta. So as I was saying before I got myself distracted, one thing that's really awesome, especially about her earlier works in the Scarpetta novels, is that she really takes the time to kind of explain things to her readers without being lectury or like a textbook. I had a lot of facts about, you know, the way bodies decompose or how autopsies are done, and a couple of other things that you're really not supposed to bring up at the dinner table, but I do. So if you're interested in learning about that, it's obviously not the same as going and taking classes or researching from medical professionals, but it is really interesting the amount of detail she puts in and how many things you can learn about the human body and about what may or may not be realistic or true from crime shows. So I think that they're worth a read. Obviously, it depends on what you're into. I could not get enough of this series. Had a little bit of a slowdown with my interest because there was a change in the way she was writing and the way she was developing her stories, but she definitely picked it back up with Dust, and I'm really excited. I had actually been talking to someone about how not all of my book reviews can be positive, and I was certain that I wasn't going to be able to give a positive one about this latest book by Patricia Cornwell because the past couple been a little questionable, but you go girl, because she pulled it together, and I highly recommend Dust, at least against the bigger versions of her book. Her earlier works in my mind are definitely better than some of the later ones, but if you're gonna start, now's the time. Oh, the other fun fact about this series, there are a number of books that you should or have to read in order, or there will be spoilers. But if you were to go out tomorrow and pick up Dust or Red Mist, which I don't advise, or Book of Dead, another one I don't really recommend, or from Potter's Field, which was good, Cause of Death. Like there's a bunch of them that you can pick up and you'll be able to understand who the characters are. You can read them without reading the ones that are before it. But there are, I think it's 5, it might be 6. I'm going to double check myself and write out all the information in the description. But there are a handful of them that you need to read in that order, or they will be spoiler ridden. I also just realized that because the last book I did was Birdman and part of a series, but not part of a series, I promise not every book I read is somehow oddly involved in a series. I do read independent books. I just happen to be on a kick. So if you have any recommendations, whether they're series related or not, please let me know. Please let me know if there's any book that you want reviewed that you see on the wall behind me, or if, you know, you have a book that you really, really love or really, really hate. I am always in the mood for a good recommendation or a good stay away from that book type referral. So please let me know. Please enjoy your reading and have a very wonderful day. Bye, everyone.